cars that murder the people of Matebeleland. And away with that badge of being thief with honor. So the book project started in 2020. And thanks to Mandla here, who has been guiding the project throughout, making sure, I didn't know that it was difficult dealing with authors and with people in general, because they don't meet deadlines, and others will tell you, my son got sick, or I got busy, so yeah, you need the bit of patience. But also, I didn't really realize, I always take an advantage when you hold the book and you say, someone has written a book and you just read it. But in the last 3 years, I've discovered how difficult it is to write a book. It's so complicated. And I think I would like to really thank all the people who were involved in, making this project exciting. Aside, this was our first time that we tried to write or to coordinate a book, because we think that it is important that history is documented. We are always told about, Olopengula, Lopengula sold the country because he was given sugar and all those kind of things. And there is nowhere where you can find Lopengula's narrative. But I still wonder why he was called Ungwalo Kamachobana, because Ungwalo means that he was a man of books. But the man of books did not write his own story. And like a person who grew up in the village where stories are told, my last story is about a young man who, every time it was a Friday, when factories were still working, before other comrades destroyed the country, every Friday people would go home. And our fathers, we knew which Friday, so they would carry books and other goodies. So this young man, the father always brought books and stories, and it was always a story about the lion and the man. And in his story, the man always defeated the lion. And one day, the young boy gathered courage and said, but Daddy, I know the lion. You are also afraid of the lion. It's one of the big five. But how come in your books, the man always defeats the lion? And the old man said, my son, unless the lion knows how to read and write, you never know about the lion's victories. So unless we have the power to also issue press statements, you never know the side of our story. You always know us as captives. I think I'll stop here.
Well, thanks so much to one of the bold and fearless journalists in Zimbabwe, for that, those opening remarks. I remember I think we had a public lecture that delivered by Basam Malunga a few days ago. He spoke about the issue of documenting Gukurahundi. Dr. Mandla Mpofu, thanks so much for documenting and putting what happened into book. Thanks so much for that. Let's clear pens for him for doing that. Right, I'll bring back again my director, Zenzele, to come and introduce the editor of this book, Memory and Erasure, Gukurahundi, and the culture of violence in Zimbabwe. Say, welcome back to the stage again. Let's clear pens for him as he comes.
Maybe I'm going to introduce. So I think I just want to say I've known Dr. Mpofu for a while. These are some of the comrades who have shaped me to the human being that I am today. When they met me, I was a bit rough. During those days, I used to actually beat up people. And there are some comrades that need to be beaten up. But they taught me to be, nice, to be civil, and to read books, and to write books. So it is my pleasure to introduce one of the editors of this groundbreaking, patriotic book that we are launching today, Dr. Mandla Mpofu.
Thank you, Mr. Ndebele, and thank you also to O'Brighton, the Master of Ceremonies. Let me also thank you, Ubabazala, Umoyo, Ugoten, for being here today. But most importantly, let me maybe make a disclaimer a little bit. It's a disclaimer. Some of the authors are here. They really did a great job. They were not hard to work with. I know why I'm saying that. They dealt with a lot of complicated issues, a lot of complex issues. There are so many authors that I see today here, including Umoy, and they all know how it can really be difficult to go through writing a chapter or an article, and sometimes you do come across as being impossible, but we really appreciate them for the work they did. I am not going to tell any stories because the program says I should give highlights of the book, so I am going to stick to that. But maybe what I should say is to also thank and ask all of us to thank Upesi Fungai Makombe, who is the co-editor of this book. Since we're telling, thank you. Since we have had a bit of history here today, I have also known Upesi for a long time, I think since maybe around 1996. And also is a journalist and an editor of Note himself, who has helped me a lot throughout our friendship and our professional life as a writer. And it was an honor to work with him on this project. But I also want to thank Zenzele for this. I think he says it was 2020. I like to think so as well. A very lazy day. It must have been during the hard lockdown when he called me and said, Amanda, you know, I think this culture of violence in Zimbabwe, which is happening now, is really worrying me. You know, I work around a lot of these issues. But I should think we should try to do a project where we document this culture and put it in the context of Gukurahundi genocide. This is where we came up with Gukurahundi and the culture of violence in Zimbabwe. So, and then later on, we thought that maybe we should expand the title to capture a little bit of what happened. And Upesi coined that first part, memory and erasure. And after working through a lot of days and nights trying to see how we can make this work. But one of the people that I want to thank is people that not many of us know personally. I have not met her personally. Irene Stanton, the publisher with the Weaver Press. Irene has worked on so many books, so many projects that myself and a lot of my friends I have here today who went to school and university with me, that we read, and we never met this woman. We always saw Weaver Press and then later Irene Stanton. Irene was, I don't know what word to use to describe her here. It will not be a nice word. Because a lot of the times, Bessie and I would not reply her emails, and I say, no, and can you talk to Irene? I don't want to reply today. She was tireless and relentless when things were not going well. And also especially asking us, so to know you are writing about a sensitive subject. You should be aware of this and aware of that. And on the other hand, Bessie and I also had to deal with authors as well, who also have their own way of putting things across. So she was not the editor, so if there are any mistakes that you find in the book, please do not blame Irene. It's on me and Percy, but we try to do our best to bring a good product. But let me just, by way of summarizing, say that the book is structured this way maybe. The first 3 chapters generally deal with transitional justice. Then the 2 chapters that follow are dealing with the violence and maybe suppression of memory, memorialization. Then we have a chapter after that, which is the 6th chapter, which deals with the linguistic aspects of Gukurahundi, written by 2 young linguists in Zimbabwe who are really doing well and who are really emerging as some of the leading linguists in the country. They did a good job in trying to link Gukurahundi to linguistic and cultural aspects of Zimbabwe. And then the seventh one is the role of the media. Most of us know that Gukurahundi was really not known, especially outside the Matabeleland regions and the Midlands where it happened, mainly because it was not covered that much in the press, especially by the local press. So this chapter deals with how the local press covered Gukurahundi. I do not want to explain the chapters as such. I think you should read them for yourself. They can speak for themselves. The last one is a personal testimony. Most of us who were either young boys or teenagers or even babies, and then of course adults during Gukurahundi, have a lot of experiences that are horrendous when we explain them. So this chapter is from one such author. I'm happy that he's around as well, who is going to maybe tell us a little bit about what he went through. I think that is what I would want to say about this. I just want, there are so many people that I need to thank who supported us in so many ways, especially Zenzele Insight and also eWeaver Press. Maybe some do not want me to mention them here because these things are sensitive, but I would like to thank Shari Epel as well. She was really helpful to all of us as authors. And I gave Shari a copy of the manuscript because she needed to write it forward. And as Shari would do now that I know, she went on and edited each of the chapters and said, Mandla, can you check this out, and which is fantastic because she's been writing, researching Gukurahundi, working on many sensitive aspects of Gukurahundi, which I want to talk about today, but which has made, again, so much experience. And most of us who were writing here, for some of us, Percy and myself, were really out of our comfort zone writing on this. But she's one of the people whose work was a guiding light to what we were writing. And also, when you write on a subject like this, which is not really your comfort zone, as I may say, you tend to be worried how your work is going to come out there. So let me thank all those people and ask you to please give them a round of applause. And let me say, we really dedicate this book to the many people who fell victim to Gukurahundi. I know all of us would say we were victims of Gukurahundi, but there are people who lost their lives, who lost lives and limbs. There are people who suffered unspeakable sexual violence and rape during Gukurahundi, and one of the chapters deals with that. Those are the people that I think we should think about when we read this book. Thank you, Ncube. I think I will stop here.
So everyone, from today onwards, call me Ncube. Siyabonga kakhulu Dr. Mpofu for that breakdown and summary of the book. Quite interesting there. I see there's a chapter that looks at the survivors as well and also focus on sexual violence on women. That's quite interesting there to find out what really happened. And for people to find out what really happened, you have got to purchase a copy of this book. I'm going to do an auction later on. It's going to be interesting when we get there. Again, let me call again my director. Say, come back, say. So now he's going to introduce the guest of honor for this afternoon, Ubaba Goten Moedapan.
It's the first time that someone calls me Say, so... Anyway, I will just, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Moyo. So I'll just talk a bit about him. There's a lot that I can say. I can talk until the cows come home or until cars are stolen. But I'll be brief on that. So he is the director of Public Policy and Research Institute of Zimbabwe. He is a senior lecturer at the Lupane University. He's a visiting scholar at the University of Rwanda. He's a board member of quite a number of publishing houses. He's also an associate member of the International Development Institute on Sustainability, that is in Japan. He is the interim president of Development Studies Association of Zimbabwe and a member of the SADC Parliamentary Forum Technical Working Group on Public Financing and Management. He is a former Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office, a former Minister of State Enterprises, Parastatals. Okay, I will not say anything about parastatals. Let me shut up. He's a former legislator of Makokoba, that was his constituency, and a former British Council Leadership Program facilitator. He is also an author. He has 5 books. He has written 16 chapters, and he has about 20 journal articles in referred international journals. So, sile njula buchopho ngesindebele. Indoda elolwazi olujulileyo. Ngizabuza eminye imibuzo ngaqeda ukuthi mbonyo kwenzakala njani uthi yatshontsha imota. Okay. So his research areas include development and finance, development states, public finance and management, corporate governance, emerging markets. He's also, like I said, he has eaten words. So he's a Chevening scholar with a PhD in African Leadership Development from NAST. He has an MPhil in Development Finance from Nelson Mandela University. He has an MBA in UZ. He has an MA in Peace Studies from Bradford University. He has a BA from UZ and a diploma in education from the University of Zimbabwe. I can go on and on and on. But for now, I would like to introduce Dr. Moyo.
Oh my God. Siyabonga.
By way of
Siyabonga Baba
summarizing,
Ndebele for the long resume. It's embarrassing when you say resume in a setup like this. Where did you get that? You should have checked. I was going to cut it down. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored, extremely honored I'm trying to adjust. Where's the gentleman? I'm trying to adjust. I'm a bit taller than Zenzele, but I think I'm okay now. I think so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored and really honored to be part of this conversation this afternoon. When I came and sat there, I cast my eyes over there. I recognized a number of important people in our community. I saw Sherry Eppel, and I was saying, wow. I met this woman when we were discussing issues of Gukurahundi. That was the very first time I met Sherry, and she took me to Matabeleland North, Matabeleland South, and we're researching about the effects of Gukurahundi, the psychological effects of Gukurahundi. And I'm happy to see you, Sherry, and that you have a chapter here. It makes this volume very important. You have the institutional memory that is very important. I also saw JJ somewhere there at the back, and he looked young because I said, is it him or not? But I noted that it is JJ. Thank you very much. These are heroes. Again, I met JJ in the early 1990s when he was busy working on the issues of Gukurahundi, documenting Gukurahundi, reaching out to the communities to ensure that the story is not lost. So I am grateful that you are here. I also note that you have got a chapter here. That's wonderful, JJ. Siyabonga. You have done well for history. You have done well for community and for humanity. We are grateful. I also saw a gentleman, but ansambona kuhle kodwa mbona ngathi indoda engahlangana la kudala silungisa indaba zona lezi ansambona ukuthi uye ngapi. Wayehlala emakhokhobu indoda lwana. Ungapi ngubonile. Ngabona usephumile. Okay. I've been asked to do a very simple exercise. The exercise of officially launching a very important initiative by Mandla Mpofu and Percy Makombe. These are great minds. They have done a sterling job. Mandla. I met Mandla when he was a young man at the University of Zimbabwe, and I wasn't surprised to see Fox somewhere there. The two gentlemen were always together, Siamese twins, and I am not surprised that he is here when Mandla is putting on the table his thoughts. He has immortalized his thoughts, and his friend is by his side. This is wonderful, Fox Spanda, thus being a friend. So I have been asked to officially launch this document. But before I do that, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to put on the table just 3 or 4 issues that I think are important in this book and in the history of Gukurahundi and the histories of the peoples of Zimbabwe, and in particular the peoples of Matabeleland. Number 1, I want to put on the table, ladies and gentlemen, the word memory. 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 To memorialize is to make something that is mortal and make it immortal. When you want to take something that is ordinarily that would die, that will disappear, but you make it permanent, that's memorialization. This book is about memorialization of the troubles of the peoples of Matabeleland and Midlands, making their story to be permanent, permanent in our minds, permanent in our hearts, and permanent in the academia and in the intellectual fraternity. That is important. There is nothing as important as history. Unfortunately, there are many types of history. We have official history, which is constructed history, where the victors, where the powerful reconstruct history according to their own whims, according to their own ideologies, according to their own cultures, according to their own ethoses, according to their own pathoses. That's official history. But that is not history. That's a concoction of history. That's what we call patriotic history. If you go to our colleges, go to our schools, you will not find Gukurahundi being taught. It is not there. And yet it is an important, indelible chapter that was etched in the consciences of the people of this country. It is not there. We are happy today that it is being memorialized. This is not the first attempt. Others have done it. But what is beautiful with this is the cross-sectional approach and the multidisciplinary approach that is captured in this document. Siyabonga, because it is now here. Once it is written, it remains and remains forever. They can try others to destroy the history, but once it is written, somebody, some way, will pick up the copies and dust the cobwebs and ensure that what is intended in the history is not forgotten. So the word memory is so important. I happened to teach a class at the University of Rwanda. Rwanda had genocide. On the 6th of April, 1994, in the afternoon, a plane carrying the president of Rwanda and the president of Burundi was brought down. On the second day, the 7th of April, genocide started for the next 100 days. In 100 days, between 800,000 and 1 million people were killed, meaning that 10,000 people were killed per day, meaning that about 533 people were killed per hour. I happen to stay there, teach there. You go there, you'll see the memory. There are museums with skulls, young as 1 year, old as 90 years. It's there. It's immortalized. The country decided that they were going to ensure memory is kept. Because if you keep the memory, you are likely not to repeat the mistake. But if you erasure, which is number 2 word for me, erasure means you want to forget, you want to pretend that something did not happen. There has been an attempt in this country by the leadership of this country, the attempt to behave or to pretend that certain things did not happen. Recently, some 3, 4, 5 months, there was a funeral somewhere in Matabele North where a chief was being buried. A very senior member of the leadership of this country said people have forgotten. People don't want to be reminded because the thinking in some of these people is that of erasure, that we must have amnesia. We must forget. We are human beings. By coming up with this book, this anthology, this volume, you are protesting against those that are wishing this to be erased. Siyabonga. Because they can sing about erasure, but once it is written, it will never be erased. If you erase things, they will always come back. If you try and forget things without attending to them, they will always come back, and when they come back, ziyabuya sezile problem. So siyabonga. Ladies and gentlemen, the memory and the Erasure, Gukurahundi, and the culture of violence is this book that is before us, that we would like to thank all the people that were involved in working towards the compiling and the production of this book. Siyababonga kakhulu ngoba umsebenzi wabo is not just for themselves, it's not just for the academia, it's for posterity, and it's for our history, for our heritage, and for the rest of humanity. It is important because it is dealing with issues of emotions. This book is emotional. When you say emotional, academics no, we don't want this as emotional, we want this as objective. No, you should ask Sabelo Gacheni, one of our doyens, who writes a lot about epistemologies of the South, the global South, where he has developed an idea of emotions as a source of knowledge, as equal to logic. So we are saying your book is emotional, and do not hesitate to talk about your emotions. This is an emotional book because you are talking about emotional issues. You are talking about lives lost. You are talking about the recovery of history. So it's emotional, it's logical at the same time. So siyabonga, inkosi ilibusise. With these few words, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the editor here to come here, and Zenzele to come here, and all the authors that are here, so that we can now officially say the book is launched, if there are any authors. They should organize that. If there are copies to carry.
There are some of the copies there.
Okay. You can just pick up the copies. Just pick up the copies.
Oh my God.
Sherry.
JJ.
I thought some of us would stand this way. Let me come.
Oh, okay. No. Oh, is everybody here?
Yeah, the others were present. These are the others who are present.
Okay.
Are we okay now? Are we standing?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The book, Memory and Erasure, Gukurahundi and the Culture of Violence in Zimbabwe, edited by Manlampofu and Percy F. Makombe, and the contributors here present, we now officially launch this book. Together we launch the book. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Probably is Enzele.
Thank you.
Well done. Thanks. So right.
I have a point to chew, so whenever you're free.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Okay, so just hold on.
Those who want to have some
Champagne.
Oh.
Can I now sit or?
You can now take your seats because you have your speaking.
Really?
Yeah, you can.
The 2Ks will say throats
Throats are clear.
throats are now opened here, pumping up.
I think I'm non-alcoholic.
So guys, if you want a copy of this book, before we open the plenary for discussions with the authors this afternoon, I would like to acknowledge those that are joining us online, Facebook as well as YouTube. Welcome to the launch of this book, Memory and Erasure, Gukurahundi, the Culture of Violence in Zimbabwe. Right, before I open the platform for authors to tell us about their chapters, I would like to maybe auction one book first. I know I have Mbinga lap, Togole Mbinga. I see Ulabo Sharon here, Dr. Mpatisi here, Clayton there, here, Mbinga Zagobla. So I would like to auction one book first before I open the discussion for the authors to talk about their chapters. Who wants to buy this copy for $100 first? Leslie? $100? Who wants to buy this copy for $100 first? Helfer? $100? Who wants to buy this copy for $100? To be signed by all authors. $100. Agula. Okay, let's do. There's an end. Where? Ah, young man. $400, Agula. Going once? Going twice? Alpha, do you want to take it? Yes. Alpha wants to take it for $100. Please, bring us a copy then, $100. Let's get pens for Alpha, man. You see, the Kalangas, we do it like that. You can do better. You can do better. You can afford $100. You can clear pens at least. Clear pens for Alpha, please. Bring a copy here for Alpha to be signed by all authors. Papa building up. Thank you so much. Now, say $80. $80. $80. Delta. $80. $80 for this copy here. You can buy two. Going $80. Dr. Mpatis, $80. Clayton. Ali. Mr. Ali. All right. I'm going to lower in the meantime, I would like to request all authors to come in front. All authors to come in front so that we have a discussion about their chapters. So as we wait for copy Alpha to be signed by all authors, Zaktelama authors wanted to come forward so that we can have a discussion around their chapters. I will start with Baba Umbuso Fuzwaya to discuss his chapter first, what the chapter entails. I think we can use that one.
Okay. Good afternoon. We participated lo prof lo doku Debe. Unfortunately kako gathesi chapter 5. We're focusing much Hello. Chapter 5 is dismembering memory of a genocide, constitutions over Palakwe. I think from early 2000, Palakwe, the government of Zimbabwe declared Palakwe to be a hero's acre. I remember discussing it with the late Tomisano Mpofoti. There is something wrong. In 2005, we had a commemoration to commemorate the end of Matabeleland genocide on the 22nd of December, where resolutions were made. And one of the resolutions was to say we have to go and contest the unfortunate eraser of memory to make Palakwe the hero's acre, because to us, it is the face of genocide. You have got bones of people from Midlands, bones of people from Mud South, bones of people from Mud North, and bones of people who were taken from Stops Camp to Palakwe. So it is a chapter that in 2017, because we had made resolution that we have to go to Palakwe, erect plaques and erect plaques in Palakwe and other areas where genocide happened at a larger scale. In 2017, I remember with the war veterans, abanye abadala nyababona lapha sisiya khona lebesivimba. There were three roadblocks. Eyokuqala yayise a retreat, enye a park, and ngagcina abanye abadala besele. Yiko kukhahlelwana lamakhandlela. But to us, it was the turning point that we are now reclaiming space. Ngiyabonga.
Right, thank you so much, Baba Fuzwai, for that summary of your chapter. And then seeing your order. Professor Nkomo, your chapter.
Salbonani. Salbonani. Good afternoon. Umbuso has already spoken about the chapter that we co-authored with Dr. Hadebe. I would perhaps maybe chip in during the question and answer session as far as that chapter is concerned. But I will speak about another chapter that I wrote with a colleague, Dr. Vusani Masego, Ose Lupane State University. Dr. Mpofu had already touched on that chapter. It deals with the linguistic dimensions of Gukurahundi, and in short, we actually deal with two of them. One is the language of the genocide. That is the language that was used to rationalize, to encourage, to even dismiss the genocide, and that continues even now. And the other dimension is what we call linguistic genocide. So it's the language of the genocide and the linguistic genocide. The linguistic genocide basically acknowledges the fact that genocides are not only biological processes of exterminating people on the basis of race, tribe, but it also deals with some cultural issues such as language. And if we acknowledge that, one of maybe the realities that we have to accept is the fact that the genocide goes on and the evidence is abound. We have seen activists actually protesting the manner in which certain languages, especially in Matebele land, that is Isindebele, and the minority languages which are actually more dominant in the region where the Gukurahundi was actually deployed. So when the physical genocide ended, linguistic and cultural genocide continued. And if we acknowledge that, then we have to actually look at some issues that have already been raised by the other speakers. For example, the fact that while you want to erase it, when you want to say it was a moment of madness, for example, the closest that maybe somebody came to acknowledging the Gukurahundi. And then you see linguistic genocide, you see cultural genocide. Well, we didn't talk about the other genocide, but even economically, genocide continues. And then you see that the problem that started, maybe even before the actual Gukurahundi started, because that's the other issue that we have to look at as well. It didn't start in 1983. It actually started long back. I'm sure the veterans here know better than me. So this is what we deal with in that chapter. Maybe to sort of sum it up, I would like to read a very short quotation that we found it so profound as far as acknowledging and maybe understanding Gukurahundi is concerned. It is a quotation that is actually in the introduction of our chapter. It says, "To escape the consequences of language, for worse or for better, would require an impossible step outside history for its speakers or writers, no less than for its audience. And whatever else we discover about the Nazi genocide, the background to this claim is broader than the specific evidence of the role of language in the Nazi genocide. The existence of a causal relation between language and history, between linguistic practice and events in the social context will be disputed only on the view of language as neutral and transparent medium. Testimony comes from many different sources of the history of language as real history, evolving in direct relation to features of the historical and social context. On general grounds, it is predictable that linguistic developments which occurred at the time of the Nazi genocide will disclose features resembling those of the process of the genocide itself. It will be difficult to understand how the latter might occur without corresponding changes in language. I think that sort of sums up our chapter so aptly that if we focus on dealing with, for example, the burials as we are currently doing, and ignore other aspects of the Gukurahundi, really, we are not sincere. And I think the developments in the linguistic fraternity, in the educational fraternity, as far as culture is concerned, they all testify to what has been summed up in the quotation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that summary. That's not fair, comrades. So thank you so much, guys, for that summary of that chapter. We're going to come to you. I have many questions around your chapter. Also, Baba Fuzwa, I have many questions around your chapter. I saw something I'm browsing here. Guys, now we are reading our books. When Zion, buy a copy there, $15 now. $15 now. Buy a copy, at least $15. So we can read together, right? So go there and buy a copy for $15. Thank you, now. And so we back us. All right. So I move on to our next author there, Baba Mpofu. Let's do your chapter, your summary of your chapter.
I was actually hoping Tion was going to continue a little bit more because I was looking for something here. But as Tion has always had a tendency to throw me under the bus, so it has happened again. But anyway, for Percy and myself, for our chapter and the introduction, what we're really concerned about was, first of all, to deal with the issue of transitional justice. How can victims of Gukurahundi, survivors, families of victims, is there going to be a time when they will say they have received justice? And when we're doing this, when we're doing the preliminary readings of that we needed, the literature review, if I may say, one of the things that we came across that I don't know if I should use the word inspired in this in something like this, but was what happened, and many of you may remember in Argentina, where also people suffered violence that is similar to what people in Matabeleland went through, and how they dealt with that afterwards. And one of the things, we actually came across that in one of Shari's writings, that one of the things that emerged there was that people need to understand that if you are a victim and people ask forgiveness from you, you actually have the right to refuse to forgive. I am not saying victims of Gukurahundi should not forgive, but it is up to them to give that forgiveness. And that was, first of all, our starting point. In Zimbabwe, there is a lot of emphasis on unity, emanating from the 1987 Unity Accord. And the unity is framed in such a way that if you raise issues around Gukurahundi, I think people who have worked around this subject, so Mbuso Fuzwayo, Zenzel, and many others who are here, understand it very well. If you are doing that, if you are raising these issues, you are against Zimbabweans uniting. You are against national unity in Zimbabwe. So you are a disruptor. Like one of the incidents that Dr. Moy referred to at the burial of the chief in Matabeleland North, we actually referred to that as well. That it was a pastor who actually said we need to deal with this in an honest manner where people should speak honestly. And the senior member of our government, I think, he stood up and said, no, when you are wanting people to remember things that they have forgotten about and they have moved on. And let me also try to find somewhere where, or before I do that. Our chapter is divided into two. The first part, we talk about criminalizing the subaltern, as we put it. That victims of Gukurahundi are further victimized, because when they raise issues about Gukurahundi, when they raise issues about justice, whether they raise issues about reparation, sometimes they are told that they are being tribalist. Simply stating that these issues happened and we want some kind of redress, we want these issues to be addressed, leads you into being further victimized, into being sometimes insulted, being told, no, government is doing something, why are you raising these issues again? So if I may read this short, it's not a quotation, but it's a sentence from our chapter. We actually refer to Shari's writing. As April 2013 points out, ZANU-PF's approach is that in Matabeleland, healing must take place without revealing. So for us, that was a major focus on our chapter. We then used one of the foremost scholars really on transitional justice, Borain, that's what he's called, who has written a lot about transitional justice emanating from his role in the TRC in South Africa, where he came up with what he called 5 pillars of transitional justice. Which if people are to achieve justice who come from an experience of, such as what we came through with Gukurahundi, need to focus on these pillars. I will not mention all the pillars because you can read those for yourself. One of them, of course, is the issue of revealing, which refers to the truth. People should be able to tell their own truth, as Obabumoyo said. But also, the government has a lot of information around this, which it can reveal if it so chooses. And I think Uzanzele, if you follow him on Twitter and some of his spaces, he has tried to always poke them about this. With no, but why don't you tell us what happened here? So that was one of the issues. And the other one was, how do we compensate the victims of Gukurahundi? Victims, survivors, the families, the communities that went through that, how can they be given some reparations? Is it possible to do that? It's not a question that I can answer or which we're able to answer. But also that question can be answered by honestly speaking to those people, to those communities. People suffered a lot of losses. I would like to read a quotation from this is JP's report, Breaking the Silence, which I hope we're all familiar with, which captures some of those losses. And then if you listen and understand what people went through, it is an experience that many people, many communities went through. Some may have been worse, some may not have been as bad as this one, but let me just read. The 5th Brigade soldiers arrived and ordered my husband to carry all the chairs, a table, bed, blankets, clothes, and put them in one room. They also took our cash. We had 1,500 saved to buy a Scotch card. They then set fire to the hut and burnt all our property. They accused my husband of having a gun, which he did not have. They shot at him. The first 2 times they missed, but the 3rd time they shot him in the stomach and killed him. They then beat me very hard, even though I was pregnant. I told them I was pregnant, and they told me I should not have children for the whole of Zimbabwe. They hit me on the stomach with the butt of the gun. The unborn child broke into pieces in my stomach. The baby boy died inside me. It was God's desire that I did not die too. The child was born afterwards, piece by piece. A head alone, then a leg, an arm, the body, piece by piece. Thank you, Mr. Ngo.
So these are the emotional, touching stories of what happened. And you hear someone denying that Gukurahundi never happened. when such stories are being told by the victims of Gukurahundi. We move on to the next author to discuss their summary of the book. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Sibongenko Simoyompofu. My contribution to this edition focuses on the difficult subject of sexual violence during the Gukurahundi genocide. I have to be honest and say that initially I did not feel that I was going to be able to write this chapter. The editor begged me a number of times and I kept promising that I would get back to him until, until he went on to solicit the assistance of Professor Dion there, who I want to say emotionally blackmailed me into writing this chapter. This is a very difficult discussion, sexual violence. Rape in itself is something that we see as a heinous crime. And during the Gukurahundi genocide, in the past 30, 40 years, that since Gukurahundi, there's been very little discussion about the subject of sexual violence. I was inspired into researching the subject of sexual violence during Gukurahundi because a few years back I found myself participating in Matabeleland North in a project around discussions of people's experiences around Gukurahundi. And during those conversations and discussions, I realized that there was very little talk, there was very little discussion about sexual violence. And I felt that there was a need to dig deeper and understand why is it that people don't want to talk about sexual violence. We know a lot about the 10 to 20,000 people who were killed during Gukurahundi. We know a lot about the thousands who were disappeared during that time, about the thousands of homes that were torched to the ground by the 5th Brigade. But there's very little conversations, there's very little being said about the suffering of women. The subject of sexual violence itself is shrouded in secrecy. We find that there's feelings of shame, feelings of fear. There's also culturally imposed taboos around this subject. And I suppose I felt that it was time. I contributed in a way, especially to SIDE, who have done a documentary about sexual violence. It's called I Want My Virginity Back. I felt that it was time that maybe we brought this discussion about the suffering of women to the public platform. In Zimbabwe, we know that in the last 20, 30, 40 years, there's been very little discussion, of course, about Gukurahundi, but there's even less discussion about the suffering of women, about the rape and the sexual violation of women. I'm sure some of us have watched the documentary, I Want My Virginity Back, and we find that some of the discussions, some of the narratives that come up are women being positioned as prostitutes because they were seen as sleeping with soldiers. But if you were to dig deeper, you find that these women had no choice. What some scholars have referred to as choiceless choices, that it's either you die, it's either we kill your parents or we torch your home. So you have to choose between these different devils and you have to pick the better devil. But they are all bad decisions. They are all bad choices. But you have to pick one that will leave you alive, that will leave your family alive. So this was the focus of my research: how women suffered at the hands of Gukurahundi. Outside of losing, mind you, they lost loved ones, they lost homes, but they also suffered the double burden of being sexually violated. And one of the things that I realized is that even though the women themselves are victims, are the direct victims of sexual violence, in the few conversations that come up about sexual violence, you find that it is the men who own that anger. The women themselves are forced to be silent because telling their stories embarrasses their families, it embarrasses their communities, it embarrasses everybody. So in order to protect the community, in order to protect their husbands, their families, and also maybe in order to ensure that they are not so embarrassed that even people in the community do not want to marry them, they are forced into staying silent. And a lot of conversations reveal the anger of the men. Abafazi bethu babethathwa ukuthi bepheke ebusuku, kuphekwane ebusuku. You realize that they're saying that something was happening, but they do not want to openly say they were raping our women. They will say, no, things were happening. They took my child. This happened to my child. But very few people will talk about the exact act of raping of the women. In short, this is what my chapter is about.
Well, let's clap hands for you. It's quite interesting also on the chapter I Kulmangayo. You know, there's a story of being told. I remember watching one of the Asake films, one of the documentaries focusing on my virginity back. There was a lady who was saying, my mother was raped by more than one man in one night. So today I'm so traumatized, I don't know who my father is. So that chapter is very interesting and very important to document the stories of the victims. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that. Let's over to you, sir. Let's summarize your chapter now, focusing on what you wrote before we take the questions from the platform.
Thank you so much. My name is Jameson Moyo, and my chapter really focuses on how I was brought up, my upbringing, how I was schooled, and the challenges that I came across. It was really a struggle. So it went on to also cover the struggles of getting education during the liberation struggle, which was very difficult. One morning you are happy, you are at school, the other morning the school is up in smoke and you have to go back and head quickly. It was very, very difficult. And only to find time to return to school when you are already 19 and you go to start at grade 7. You can imagine how it is. And when you go to school wanting to really get in class, you only find that they are learning in a class which does not have a roof. And then I turn my back and tell the teacher that, well, invite me once they have roofed, because I can't learn in an independent country where in a classroom where there is no roof. And rightly so, on the following year, the headmaster sent somebody to, the teacher sent somebody to come to Binga and inform me where I was, that, well, you are working in Binga, the classroom has been roofed. Can you come back to school? And I really went back to school. Yes, when I went to school, I was meant to go to Form 1 straight away. And when I met my colleague in Form 1, I found they were learning under the trees and so forth. Then I said, no, I will go to grade 7 and repeat grade 7 until this site is roofed. And it was such challenges that I came across to an extent that finally I managed to get to secondary school. And when I was in Form 2, on the 8th of February 1983, then we hear a sound of vehicles, many vehicles going towards the Siwale camp in Lupane. Some of you will remember the Mzola area and then the Siwale camp. You know, it was not easy for us to really comprehend that these cars were there to come and kill people. We couldn't imagine it. The following day, we just went to school as if all was normal. And when we got to school, everything was normal. We were not aware of what was taking place. Only at 10 to see soldiers coming to classes, and some peeping through the windows, some getting through the windows, some standing by the door ordering us to go to the ground, to the playground. And when we were there, only to meet the children from the primary school, we were all brought together, almost 300 or so students, and the beating started. We could not imagine, really. The beating started at 10 or 10:30 thereby, and they went on until around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock thereby. But things were bad. Things were bad. They beat us until they were tired. And when they were tired, they then ordered us to fight. You will find 4 people fighting each other. How do you fight amongst yourself when you are 4? But there will be about 5, 6 soldiers around you beating you like you never know. And only to have some being taken aside, girls taken aside, some boys taken aside. For example, our head boy, Sibangilizwe, was taken away on that particular day. I still remember them you know, stepping on his neck and beating him and calling him a dissident. And we the challenge that was there is that the head girl was asked about the whereabouts of dissident, but because of language, she explained that she knew nothing. Maybe the boys might have come across the dissidents. Then they stopped beating this girl and went for him, then calling him a dissident. So to many students, it was as if the head girl sold out the head boy. And they took him away. We never saw him up to today. We never saw him. But my chapter goes on to explore even other incidents which took place where I was not there, but later I came to know about these. For example, there is something that happened to us maybe after 2 weeks of the arrival of the soldiers, where youth in our area were rounded up, and they were rounded up at around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and throughout the night. And this happened in 2 areas. And in this other area, almost around 13 or so people were killed at around 4 a.m. It was as if there was a contact when they killed these. And these were youth that we had spent the day with. For example, we were papping the father of one of the colleagues who was killed there, who was my classmate. But on the following day, when they killed everybody on that particular day who was present, they forgot him. He was the first to be caught, but they forgot to kill him. So one soldier released him and told him to run away. But unfortunately, he ran away to his home, and 3 soldiers followed him up, and they found him sharing the story with the family. There were about 11 family members there, only for the soldiers to tell him to bid the family farewell, and they were there to kill him. Then they asked him to stand by the gate. The family pleaded, and they said, there is no way we can leave this one alive. They offered them the kekli. They could not take the kekli. So they killed this guy. They shot him with about 3 to 5 bullets, and he was dead. So it is these incidents that happened on that particular day that I cannot forget. On the other side of the Mzola River, I talk of other schoolmates and other neighboring youth who were killed. And amongst these youth who were killed was one of our son-in-laws. My sister who comes after me was among these. But unfortunately, fortunate enough and unfortunate enough, she had been just married to a Ndlovu family, and these were beaten to a pulp before they were killed. And as they were being killed, my sister responded in fluent Shona. She had learned Shona in Midlands. We have an aunt who is married in the Midlands, and she spoke fluent Shona. Then they said, what do you want amongst the Ndebeles? And then, where do you come from? She said, I come from Shurugwi. Then they said, now that you come from Shurugwi, can you tell us which family you come from? She said, I come from the Mandevu family. I'm Ndirimlo Mroora wakwa Mandevu, meaning I'm married to the Mandevu family. But that's what they called her. They called her Mainini. So she said, I'm a Mainini of the Mandevu family. They stopped beating her. But they had already killed her husband. They had killed the sister to the husband. They had killed the nephew there. Then we hear now in 2013 that the Mandevu family, the commander of the Mandevu family was the one leading that battalion. And they stopped killing my sister because they went to call him to come, and because they felt she was his relative. He came and saw my sister there. Then she said, "Oh, it's my Nini. Don't kill him. Don't kill her." So she survived as a result. It was not until in 2007, I decided to visit this Mandevu family and talk to this guy. Unfortunately, when I got there, it was in Kwekwe. He was in Kwekwe Hospital. He was ill. So I failed to talk to him. I came back. Then I organized Pastor Ray to say we need to visit him. Then I said once he's out of hospital, I was going to inform him. The next thing, my parents were called and told that he has passed on. So we went for his burial, and he went to the grave with that information, unfortunately. But when I lost my father, these are family members. They were called, and the two brothers came. That was in 2013 for the burial of my father, and they were part of the burial delegation. We buried my father. After the burial, they called me aside with one of my remaining uncle, and they apologized for the death of the brother-in-law, for how my sister was beaten, and this was in 2013. And unfortunately, this is not covered in this chapter, because I wrote this chapter in 2003. Thank you to Irene, and now here it is being published. So I couldn't add that aspect, but well, in future I will. So the challenge that is there now is that my uncle is the one who has to address the family and tell them about this apology. I'm very hopeful that he is not going to go to the grave without passing that to the family, and that will give me a burden of being the one now to tell the family that, well, an apology has been brought. So I think I believe that there are many perpetrators who want to apologize for what they did, but unfortunately the atmosphere, the environment on its own does not permit them. So we still have this struggle that some people will go to the grave with a lot of information that really will help us. Anything that has not been written is as good as it did not happen, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for that summary of the chapter, Unforgettable Memories. Those who are joining us online, I haven't forgotten you. If you want to purchase your book, please DM site or DM Zenzele Ndebele on Twitter or Facebook. Then you can get your copy for $15. Those who just joined us here physically, of course, I see you there. The book is going for $15. You can go there on my far right to purchase your copy for $15. Dr. Moyo, you've been quiet. Let me bring you back into this conversation. You've been listening to the authors speaking about their chapters. What's your reflection to their chapters? I'll open the platform for you guys if you want to ask questions after Dr. Moyo.
Thank you very much. It's so touching. Silalele JJ Lapana, the personal stories are touching stories, and I can't. In fact, I'm swimming, not swimming, but drowning in emotions, particularly about this Mandevu family. Ukuthi umuntu uyafika ubulala izihlobo zakhe, you know, only to discover that izihlobo zakhe. These are painful stories. So we all go around carrying these burdens with us. That's all I can say. But I also really was touched about story sexual violence Gukurahundi. That's deep, my sister. That's real deep because this is untold stories. These are untold stories. Particularly, there are children, there are men and women who are walking around. They can't even talk about their fathers. They can't. It's so difficult. You have written a very touching a chapter. Thank you very much.
Dr. Moyo, for that reflection of the authors, what they wrote in their chapters. The book is going for $15, guys. So now I'll open the platform for you to ask questions. I'll take, let's say, 5 yen, because I have 5 authors, Pamwam Lab. So I'll take 5 yen. If you have any burning question that you want to ask, you can raise your hand, then I'll not see you or recognize you, and then you can go ahead with the question this afternoon. Any hand? Yeah, please, can we have the microphone that side, over? Let's be brief, straight to the point. Let's ask our questions straight to the point. One question per person, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. MC. Unfortunately, it is a well-narrated book, written so that we should always have this book reminding us of what transpired. My question is, yes, it's well good and narrated and written, and it will, many people will read about it. But the perpetrators of Gukurahundi, they are still moving about. What do you have any plans about taking the perpetrators to the international court? I heard Dr. Moyo speaking about the genocides in Rwanda and so forth. When is genocide? When is it a genocide and not a genocide? It is, they are talking of 20 people. I don't know who was counting those people at that time. According to our research, there are more than 20,000 people that were actually killed. I, for one, I'll give you an example of my nephew. I believe I went to Mzola at 5 with a group of people who were saying they are healers, something like that. But then when we got there, I asked, before they exhumed, I said there will be no exhumation of my nephew's body or anything that they wanted, until and unless there are international reporters. It was a battle because we said no with the other family members. So I'm saying, are there any plans to take this case further so that the wounds of those who have been badly affected, even including those who are even not affected, who were not directly affected, because people share these problems. So I would like to know whether there are any preparations or a special committee that will take this further. Because remember, it's not only the perpetrators who are Zimbabweans. The British are involved.
Sir, let's be time conscious. Please wrap up your question.
Okay. The British should be questioned. They are the planners. The Koreans, they are the trainers. The Zimbabweans are the people who supplied the personnel. So these three institutions or groups of people, once they are not tackled or done, Zimbabwe will always have this wound. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for that question. What I would do is I will take more 4 hands. Let's be brief. 1 minute, I'll cut you, please. We're running out of time. You can go ahead and say, Baba Ngwe.
Ngiyabonga. Kangibuzi mfana wami. Ngiyabonga ababhalileyo ngokuba nxa singabhalanga akusoze uhambe kahle. Ngithanda ukubonga bonke abacontributileyo for the hard work, for the time that they gave to this particular subject, Gukurahundi genocide. Ngokuba ababulali kabafuna ukubulala kuphela abantu. After bebulela abantu bafuna ukubulala iqiniso. ngakho ke leli bhuku lingeyinye indlela yokugcina iqiniso liphila ukuze likhulume la sebedlule emhlabeni. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Thank you so much for sticking to 1 minute, sir. Another hand, I see another hand here, Pambili.
No, I just want to maybe suggest that I feel there's a component that should have been there. I don't know, the component of religion to say what were songs that were sung during this time. The two tribes going to the same church when these things were happening. I would have loved to know the dimension of what could have happened between the two tribes as people were going to church. What was the role of religion in this situation? Maybe in the next chapter, in the next book, find out how churches how sermons were created and how music was sung between the two when these things were happening. Imagine singing in one choir, the two different tribes. You know this thing is going on. How was church during this time? It's just a question.
Thank you so much for that question. Two more hands, but also let's try to be cognizant of gender. I see I have only one female and asking questions here. I want to bring over. Oh, Mama, where are you? For the last two, let me find ladies to ask questions before I give to two men. Any ladies want to ask a question? Agula. Let's go ahead, Baba.
Ngiyabonga Director of the Ceremonies. Ngibonga njalo abalobi balolu gwalo. Ugwalo lolu ngokubona kwethu isiqalo somsebenzi esiphakathi kwawo. Ngiyethemba sikhuluma nje kathesi sonke siyawazi ukubana uhlelo langendlela oluzaphathwa ngayo ukuthi kutholakale ijustice, kutholakale iqiniso ngokuthi kwenzakalani. Lokhu luphendulelwa left, right and center. Ngiyaxolisa ngokubuza ngesindebele kuphela senginanzelele silabanye bethu phakathi. How are we as a people of Matabeleland and Midlands going to get this issue addressed so as to get proper justice for our people or the survivors and the victims of Gukurahundi? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that short question. Should I go back to my authors to respond? Right, let's go back, Pambili. Authors, I'm giving 1 minute each to respond to the asked questions. We're running out of time. So let's stick to 1 minute. Try to respond to what has been asked. Baba Fuzwa, I'll start with you.
In which is asking how is Midlands, North, South going to get justice. It's sad because the perpetrator is still in charge. I have always said there was who accused one sadly is led Mumgabe, who accused two Emerson is in power currently Agatoni Sisegi, who accused the three Usidni Sekaramai, Ushles were not making an effort to have him go to court, who accused the four parents Shirisoafa. I have said if we are not bold enough ukuthi sibanikeze ukuthi bango accused, whether they die but kuze befe bele teki yokuthi ufe ulecala, anti bataliboli sizakuthi udayi lundoda lo wafa ebulele abantu engathonisiswanga because he had state power. Lundoda wafa engathonisiswanga because no one is coming to our side. You ask yourself, why is it that the international community, the death of over 20,000 people, the disappeared, women raped, they are not taking any action? Kuthiwa ngipotpori lwana wabulala abantu sebambopha elabo 90 something years, umgabe ufela abo 90 something years akayenzwanga lutho. Emerson akula muntu enza anything. Sydney
akula muntu enza anything inosibonke baze bafa. So mbona ngazathi ijustice esingayithola for the first time yikuthi nje sibe kwazi ukuthi i-restorative. Then lay esifuna ukuthi umuntu efakwe insimbi izahlupha ngenxa yokuthini amadoda laba mbumbuso amasotsha they are part of abantu bana laba basibulalayo amapolice they are part of ilokozeni. Ulabanye abantu like imedia. You ask yourself ukuthi indlela imedia was reporting ngayo you ask yourself ukuthi ama journalist ahamba lalo othandwa ngamazipra kakhulu uSolomon, because they will always try to shield him as if he was innocent, but in Themba la Peter Godwin uSolomon is as guilty as abanye bakhe, because in trying to hide into yona leyana lokuethusela uPeter Godwin ukuthi uzamdobola, he said it himself uSolomon. So mbona ngazathi into yethu ilabantu abaningi la namhlanje singathini, why are they not tried, especially abantu ababe ku media, because imedia ngeyinye into eyayispreada i-hate even on ama-journalist ayi-chronicle le-Herald during that tour eka Solomon, they were on the side of perpetrator. Nyabonga.
Mina umbuzo engicabanga ukuthi ungathi uyangisondelela yilo obuza ukuthi kwakuculwa ziphi ingoma kusetshenziswa luphi ulwimi. Asizange sakucabanga ke ngesikhathi sibhala our chapter on the linguistic dimensions of Gukurahundi, but I'll just maybe try to throw it back and lingixolele ngangimncane. In fact, I'm still young. Esikwaziyo, which we actually presented in our chapter, yikuthi i-language ye-Gukurahundi kwakuyisishona, kwakuhlatshelwa omayi badigondo. Ngizawuinterpreta again umbuzo wakho in terms of maybe trying to show how through language people coexisted during that period. And I would like us to think about how through language we are actually trying to coexist now. I think this is where maybe the other dimension, linguistic dimension that we interrogate, that is a linguistic genocide. Uguti, we are now coexisting, saying let's celebrate our diversity. Let us maybe speak the language of unity and the language of peace. But if we look at the language practices, what we see is that whereas the liberation struggle was a struggle for equality, a struggle for human dignity, which includes allowing people to celebrate their culture and to express themselves in ways that they are most comfortable in, including language. What we see is that language planning after independence has basically meshed what we may term politics of replacement, whereby, whereas the power was in English during the liberation struggle, the power has gone to the perpetrator, and the language of the perpetrator actually dominates. One of the illustrative examples that we give in the chapter is the fact that even artists, you will have gifted artists from Matabeleland, but for them to actually get audience, they have to sing in the language of the perpetrator. You will have someone who says, we are past that black chapter and now we have to coexist. And the person will get into the depths of Matabeleland and address illiterate masses in a language that they don't understand. So through those examples, I think we can get a sense of how maybe things might have played out in church. Although I would actually wonder if people worshipped together during that time, unless maybe if they were forced marched to the same church, in the same way as they were forced marched to where they would sing Maiva Tikondo.
Thank you. Okay.
You give an author the mic to respond, they write another book. I'm giving 1 minute. I'm sticking to 1 minute now.
Yes, and please forgive me. There is something that I should have done when you really did give me time to talk as long as I wanted. That is to acknowledge people who are not here. First of all, the other authors who are not here. I acknowledged our co-editor. But there are other authors that I just want to mention. I won't mention their chapters now that you have threatened me. Cynthia Chikwenya, then there is Pezisai Rohanya and Begezela Kumbo. Then there is Busanma Sego, and then there is Peginkosi Chakobe Ngube. But I also want to pay tribute to Owen Masego. Dion just reminded me, who gave us the illustration. He's a fantastic artist from Matebele and from Zimbabwe, let me say, from Africa, who really has done wonderful work. And these are people we should celebrate. Maybe I should also mention Kukuletu Siziba for the poem is late, a young life that maybe went too early, who was doing a lot of fantastic work around some of these issues that we are writing about here. Then I think the issues that I would have responded to have been covered. Mainly that we still have perpetrators in power. The situation that Dr. Moyo spoke about in Rwanda, it has been possible also because the perpetrators are no longer in power. And in many other contexts, that is how it is. So perpetrators, criminals, if you want to call them, as Fuzwa said, would want to protect themselves, would want to ensure that they do not face justice, they do not account. But also let me say, the UNITA Code also, it was not a UNITA Code, we all know. It is also one of the biggest problems that we face, because as far as the government, we have listened to Minister Ziyambi, as far as he and his gang are concerned, Gukurahundi was addressed in the UNITA Code. Actually, perpetrators were given amnesty in the UNITA Code, that they should not be prosecuted in future and they are forgiven for all the crimes that they committed. Not that they should not be pursued, I may say, but how do we ensure that is not a question that I really can answer. If Mboso cannot answer it, he's been working around this for a long time. I don't know how I can answer it, but it's something that part of it is making sure that that history is documented. I don't agree say that you should have refused for your nephew to be exhumed and buried properly. Because when we do not do that, the people who remember him, who were around when that happened, may no longer be there in the future when we would want to do that. He may also be forgotten. So we need to continue documenting this history, ensuring that if they are to be exhumed, those exhumations are well documented, they are done in a proper way, so that that can be a record. That record, as Mbuso says, it can be done maybe when we're all gone. But people may refer to documentation that was carried through where we were, if we are able to mark every grave, listed every disappeared person. Let me not write another book though. I will stop there.
Allow me to close here, because I see one cut was about to change here now. So allow me to close here. Is it okay for me to close without a response? Is it okay? Thank you so much for that. Right, that brings us to the end of the Asake Film Festival. Right, allow me to call my director again, President Devil, to come and close this Asake Film Festival for this year. And then after that, guys, allow Brighton, Ongube, as the hours are called, Silda Maravioli, Lama Asparagas, and wait. When I focus on what you right? Right. So also focus on what you know. Asparagus and ravioli is for me, right? Thank you so much, guys.
Namhla ngikhulumile too much. So I realize why politicians enjoy talking. It's always nice when listening to you. Anyway, it has been a fantastic week. Besides stealing cars, I'm a storyteller. So when JJ was talking about the head boy, there is a friend of mine, Oli Kalango, Peggy. He contributed a chapter. So Peggy always tells stories about the Gukurahundi. And he says Gukurahundi afika a village in Yenilamba, Butani Sabantu. Kwaze kuthiwa abantu abakhipha izithupha. So umdala wasekhipha izithupha, and just put up paper sasinethwa lizulu lani. So the ID was torn, Then the soldier took the ID, lifted it up. What akusi dissident direri? Akusi dissident direri? Izakamizi, including his wife, said hello. So they said the guy was a dissident because he had a torn ID. And at that particular time, no one would have said he is not a dissident, because the question was, is this a dissident? And based on the torn ID, people said, hello. We know what happened to the man. He's not with us today. So these are the stories that we hear every day, and these are the stories, many of them, that are not documented. And there are people who have always talked about the international court and all those kind of things. Please remember that Gukurahundi happened before ICC was created. So it's not possible for Gukurahundi perpetrators to be taken to the ICC because it was created after Gukurahundi. And Umpofu as well has talked about the amnesty of 1988. So the only way currently where you can have justice, which is very unlikely, is for a UN to have a special tribune on Gukurahundi. And we know that is not going to happen, because for it to happen, all the permanent members of the Security Council have to agree. And of course, China and Russia are going to veto that because they are our comrades, and we have a look east policy. So for now, I think we like what the chiefs are trying to do. Maybe we need to be focusing on other issues like reburials, like getting documents, because justice is not on the horizon. Realistic. So it's sad, but that's the reality, because in Zimbabwe we have the amnesty, and internationally ICC does not, and I don't see an international tribune on that. So those are sad realities. But this has been an amazing week, educational, eye-opening, as well as the fact that we were meeting different people and socializing. I made new friends and new enemies. But that's how life goes. So for now, but I think we would like to honor our authors and our guest of honor. Then the rest of us can follow. Thank you very much.